prayer. And it says we are live, and I'm going to check just to make sure. I think it lags a little.
Yeah, I think they all do.
I think so. Well, it says we are. Oh, yes. Now it says I am. We are there. Yay. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Breaking the Silence. Conversations on grief, addiction, and healing. And and mental health just automatically falls in there. I just didn't want to make the title any longer. But oh, I am so excited for you to be here. You guys will love Denise. She is a dear friend, and we have walked our journey together. It's been a couple years, hasn't it?
At least a year and a half, I think.
Well, we started mirror work, the first mirror work, a year ago, January.
Oh wow, it's been that long. Time flies, doesn't it?
No, I was thinking about it when I was posting about this. I'm like, wow, we've been a couple years. It was,
Okay.
yeah. So it's been interesting. It's been beautiful to witness your journey and to see your beautiful face on a camera. I love it because we never saw you in that first container that we shared. You would never come on camera.
That is
And
true.
to see your beautiful face is amazing. So I'm just going to let you tell your story and we'll just have a conversation. I'll ask questions as they come up, whatever, and go from there.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Angelique, and I'm so thrilled to be here today. And you're right, it has been a journey. And I think that's the biggest piece of all is we are all on a journey. And I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Denise Porter. I'm an RTT therapist, that's Rapid Transformational Therapy, and an intuitive guide. And I'm also an elementary school teacher. So I have a bit of a combination of everything there. And as Angelique said, it's true. I was not able to go on live 2 years ago today. Forget it. Visibility was something that was a challenge for me. I didn't like to see myself online, and it was scary. It still can be scary, but I'm learning that it's okay to do hard things. So I'll start at the beginning of my journey and let you know kind of where I've come. It's been a long journey. So I grew up in a bit of an addiction trauma home. Both of my parents were alcoholics. They both had their own issues. There was a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, and a lot of capital T trauma. And what happened to me is I ended up losing my voice, in that my anxiety was so bad that I just couldn't function. I would go to school and I wouldn't speak. I can speak. I was able to speak then, but it felt like I was in this big box. And if people would come and talk to me, they couldn't get through that box. And right now, that would have been, I was considered like a mute child. My teachers would talk to me and I wouldn't respond, but I could talk to my friends because my friends felt safe.
Interesting. So it wasn't like trauma induced muteness.
It's called selective muteness. I think there's even a
Okay,
newer title that they have right now, but basically, it was induced by trauma.
right.
And for me, my anxiety was just, I was so worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, and then having all that trauma that was stuck in my body, and I didn't know how to respond. And so it took me a long time to release that. I went, I think, all the way through elementary school and then into high school. In high school, I was just a little bit quiet. I didn't quite have the same things, but I was very, very quiet. And I had that anxiety all along, that overwhelm that just really stops you from doing things. And I'm really lucky in that I've always been an avid reader. For my whole life, probably starting at 15, I started with all of the self help books and I was reading them all.
Oh,
Like
wow.
Psycho Cybernetics, Tony Robbins, you name it, I read it. So I
At
started
15, I
reading.
was reading the trashy romance novels.
Well, later on, I picked that up too, because those were the best ones that you can, look at the cover and decide which one you want it to read based on the cover.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes. The
But I
Harlequin.
definitely, yes, those were really good too. But so part of my journey was just figuring out this anxiety. And it was my hands would sweat. I have hyperhidrosis, which would kick in when I was a teenager. And just, I would become this mess trying to speak. And so when I was looking at trying to figure out what did I want to do when I was a grown up, I originally wanted to be a lawyer because I am good with words. I've always been a very good writer. I've been able to write really, prolifically if I wanted to. Although ChatGPT is pretty awesome. I'll just say it's so much faster.
We, we have a really strained relationship right now, so I will not speak on that.
Okay. But I had those tools. And learning, I had to figure things out. But it wasn't until I got a little bit older and I had my own kids that the trauma response really kicked in. And I noticed that I was feeling depressed, I was anxious, and I didn't even know I was depressed. It wasn't until my doctor told me, she said, I think you're depressed. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I get up, I go to work every day, I do what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not depressed. I'm just going through the motions. And because all of that trauma was stuck in my body and I didn't know how to release it. So I started looking for a solution. And I had a friend of mine at the time that she just had the yellow pages and she opened the yellow pages. I know I'm dating myself here. I apologize. Yellow pages, for those of you that do not know, had a whole bunch of people with numbers because back when we had these dial-up phones, we couldn't just, pick up our cell phone and call people. We had to put in a quarter. And she opened it and we found a Huna energy healer. And what Huna is,
Really?
yeah. And it's a
Wow.
form of ancient Hawaiian shamanism. And that was my first introduction to energy in terms of actual energy healing. I mean, I've been reading books and things like that, but I did a bunch of courses. I learned how to be a practitioner. But as I would go to all of these courses, I was among all of these people that were seeing all of these things, and they would see all these unicorns and ponies and different random things. And I'm sitting there going like, am I in the right room? Because I don't see those things. They're not there for me. And I know I had a very analytical mind, science degree, psychology background, a lot of neurology, because I've been fascinated with the brain. And I couldn't get myself out of my own head. So I kept taking more and more courses. And as I was taking those courses, I started to learn a little bit more. And my own children started to grow up a little bit. And my oldest has severe anxiety. So her anxiety was even worse than mine, such that she was just didn't want to go out in the world, stopped doing things. And part of it, there was bullying at school. And I thought, you know what, for my own kids, if I can at least have them grow up without the same kind of trauma I did. And, we did all of the things and we made sure we had all of the things in place. And then school went and caused the trauma. So it wasn't even from us. So you just never know what is going to happen in your life and how you're going to deal with that. And I remember getting a phone call. I think she was in grade 7 at the time. And from the vice principal, that one of the kids that she was friends with said she was cutting. And I was so devastated at that point because I thought, how did this happen to me? I'm an educator. I know all about these things. I know how to prevent them. How did I miss this in my own house? And more importantly, how am I going to help her? What am I going to do? And how are we going to get through this together as a family? Because it was a big deal. And then the other piece I thought of is how this child was terrified of needles, let alone anything else. And her trauma from school was so strong that that's what she was doing to cope. And again, she had that silence and she wasn't sharing that information because she was internalizing that. And I felt really guilty as a parent because I thought, you know what? This ancestral trauma that's passed down, it's all my fault. It's because of me. I caused this. I did it. And I took on full responsibility for that, whether it was mine or not. I held it. And holding that is really, really big. And we did get her help. And we found, some great therapists and we worked on it. But then we reached the point where she went to high school and completely shut down and said, nope, no more school. I'm not going, not doing it. And then I had to deal with, okay, now what? At that point, I was a special education teacher. So I had even more experience, even more knowledge, but I couldn't help my own child. She did not want to go to school. And if you've ever experienced it, you can't make someone, short of throwing them over your shoulder like Flintstone style,
Especially a teenager.
especially a teenager who was taller than me.
The more you push, the more they push back.
Exactly. And it wasn't happening. But I had that. I say now it's an opportunity, but at the time it was terrifying because it's one thing to deal with your own trauma, but when you're dealing with someone else's, you don't have any control over it. Not that you have control anyways. Control is a bit of an illusion, but at least it feels a little bit better if it's you. But when it's someone you really care about, that's hard because you almost have to release a little bit of control and release things out. And I had to surrender to the universe and just say, you know what? I need help. I don't know where I'm going to find it. I don't know how I'm going to find it, but someone up there somewhere, help. And we went and we tried all the traditional things, the Western medicine piece. She ended up in psychiatric center a couple of times. We went through all of that, and that was hard too. And I would just, I remember breaking down at school and having to run and leave because I couldn't take it anymore. And I was at the time dealing with a lot of children as well, with some pretty intense issues of their own, because I was the one who they came to for behavior. I was working with a lot of children with autism, some of them nonverbal, some of them verbal, a lot of children that had some really complex problems, severe anxiety, different kinds of things. So again, I had the tools. So what I did is I took the tools that I had and I started working with her and doing what I could. But I also had her working with a lot of people with energy, because what happened was she wouldn't talk to conventional people. But the energy people have this really sneaky way of kind of going in the back door. And
Well, we tend to go a little higher.
a little higher, yes. I guess it's more of a drop down than. But that started working. And what I learned is that she was so, so sensitive. And I didn't tell you even about my haunted house. We lived in a haunted house at the time, which complicated matters a little bit more. We had spirits everywhere. It was like this crazy vortex. And so she was getting so much information and she was just inundated with it. And because she's so empathic and so sensitive, she couldn't process that information. She didn't know what was hers and what was everyone else's. So you think about a school and you have 1,000 kids in that school and teenagers, as you mentioned, very intense. It's a very turbulent time for kids. And you're getting all of that information and it's all coming at you and you can't filter it. So that's what she was dealing with. And we finally got to a point where we got her back in for a couple of months. And then the pandemic started. And the whole world just shut down. And I thought, oh my gosh, all this hard work, we had finally done it. And now everyone's at home.
And she probably thought it was great.
She did actually. She was pretty relieved. But at the same time, looking back now, she says she regrets it because she didn't get to have that normalized experience. And I say normalized because everyone's normal is different. But my experience at the time, I just remember just how intense it was. And I go back to one incident. I remember the police showed up at our door. I happened to be at Costco because, Costco was the greatest place ever. And I got a phone call saying, you have to come home now because the police are here. I'm like, what do you mean the police are here? What is going on? And I get home and sure enough, they'd shown up because I guess she had told someone that she was considering harming herself. And it was very, very stressful. Like, I cannot tell you as a parent how stressful that is to hear that. True or not true, you just don't know. and you freak out. And my first thought was, okay, I have to hide everything sharp. Let's just put it all away, lock it all up. And I mean, they will tell you that doesn't really matter. You've got to work through the rest of it.
Right.
But we had to go through, and I remember they showed up, and it's like it's in little images, like it's on TV. And I had given her this charcoal powder for her teeth, and she had thrown it all over the bathroom. And my first thought, as the parent thinking, oh my God, here they are showing up. The bathroom's a mess. There's stuff everywhere. They're going to think I'm crazy. And we're just going to take everyone away, because your brain just starts to go through that. And when your brain already is so used to living in trauma, your cortisol levels become really high, and you just constantly go into that fight or flight. And that's what I was dealing with myself. And now I have to deal with that.
Gets so bad.
It is. It doesn't feel good at all. And you have this kind of negative thought loop that goes on in your head, and it just kind of keeps going around. But I was proud of her because she stood up to them. And she actually said, you know what? I didn't do that, and I'm not going with you. So sorry. And
Good for her.
It was actually very impressive. And I remember sitting there watching her thinking, wow, I am terrified right now, but I am so impressed by you. And it just really made me think, okay, it doesn't matter even the scariest moments in our life. You can stand up no matter what you've been through and what's happening. And I mean, she did end up going with them. My husband came home and they all went together, and we got through it. And they released her and let her go because they didn't think she was a risk anymore. But it was something we lived with for several years, and something we went through. And just thinking about that trauma, I had my own trauma, and that was different. But that trauma of your child, and knowing that your child is going through that and you can't help them, that is even bigger. And that sat with my heart for a long time. And it was really hard. And then it was hard getting into this work, because I started stepping into this work at that point because I was looking for a solution. I wanted to know, how do I help her? How do I help myself? And how do I make sure that this doesn't happen to any of the other parents that I know, things that are happening around me? And at that point, we had a close friend whose daughter did commit suicide. And it was a very horrible thing to witness. And it's something you don't recover from. And I had done all of the training, but none of the training prepares you for having to live it. It really doesn't matter what training you have. And so for me, that was the biggest lesson in learning that, you know what? This is needed in the world. These tools are needed. And I actually started at school working with some of the kids and teaching them just little bits here and there about energy. We used to play with it. We'd make energy balls. We would do different kinds of things. I was really lucky in that in my role, I was a special education teacher. So I was teaching kids how to read. I was doing different kinds of things with them. And so what we would do is work on their self-esteem first, because without the self-esteem, we couldn't get to anything else. It's really hard to teach a child how to read when they think horrible things about themselves, and they've tried so many things and failed so many things. So that's what we worked on. And so that's how I started to kind of build my desire to do this in the world, and to think about, how can I help? What can I do to serve others? And what can I do to allow them to get through their trauma? And for me, it's been doing it right alongside. As we talked about earlier, the visibility piece. When you have that kind of trauma and you're constantly told, don't tell anyone what's going on at home, because you tell someone, you're going to be taken away. And it becomes a challenge. You don't want to talk. You don't want to show up. And then there's that fear of judgment and the journey there. And you worry, okay, what are people thinking? Really? Right. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Well, and that's like that fear for parents that have lost children, or whether they've lost them to death or not, with the addiction and the mental health problems, that judgment and that that stigma that people hold about, it's the parent's fault. Why you're a bad parent because your kid is an addict, or you're a bad parent because your kid has mental health problems. And, you know, we know that it's generational and we know that it's trauma triggered, but it's not seen that way. And so many of the parents that are grieving their kids, whether they're alive or not, they're still grieving, number one. And
Absolutely.
I went through 20 years of different types and levels of grief, because my kids were addicts and did have mental health issues. And nobody is there to accept the fact that it's just part of life. And it's not being a bad parent. I mean, fuck, we do everything we possibly can to try to fix them.
Yeah.
But like you said, we can't. We can't fix them. We can only guide them, and sometimes we have to step back and let them fail.
And that's the hardest thing to do. But what you mentioned, the stigma, that was big. I experienced a lot of that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there is a lot of pushback. Like, what do you mean your kid won't go to school? Like, what's wrong with you? What are you doing wrong?
Right.
Instead of how do you do something right? It's what are you doing wrong? And I started to believe it at one point, thinking, okay, what am I doing wrong? All of my friends, their kids just go to school. They just do the things they're supposed to do. But I'm like, my child is gifted. She has a lot of other things. So what am I doing wrong? And that's the piece that's really tough. And I felt that as an educator myself, I have always made sure when there's a conversation that I look at those parents and I tell them, you know what? You are doing everything right.
Yeah.
You are here. You're showing up for your kid. And that's the biggest thing we can do with it. We can show up. And as you said, sometimes let them fail. And sometimes just kind of, we're there to catch them
Yeah.
no matter what happens. And we're there to support them and hold them. But we can't live their lives.
Right.
And we just can't.
And we can't change the outcomes.
We
I
cannot change
couldn't.
the outcomes.
I could not save my boys' lives. You know, no matter what I did, they have their path and their contracts and their journey, and it wouldn't have mattered. Everything that I did would not have saved them, and obviously didn't.
Right. And it's true. And I feel blessed in that, my child is still with me. And
Right.
she's really, truly growing into an incredible adult. But sometimes it's those moments and those things that happen to us. And we don't want to necessarily wish them away. Like I can go back to all of that capital T trauma, and it wasn't all bad. Like there's always that dichotomy, right? Because there's beautiful things too. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
hard to go back and think, you know what, it was all bad. It wasn't. It absolutely wasn't. And they were doing the best that they could do at the time.
Right.
And
And
I
we chose those environments. We chose those lessons. You know,
absolutely,
and when we realize the depth of that choice, that we chose the lessons and the soul contracts before we came here. And when you understand how deep that really goes, it's just mind blowing
it really
because
is.
I chose all the shit that I lived through, 30 years of domestic violence and raising my kids in that trauma. And I dealt with that mom guilt for a long time. But, and it was just a couple weeks ago that I was visiting kids and grandkids back home, and I was driving around, and it was a hard trip. I mean, it was good, but it was hard also. There was a lot of stress and a lot of things going on and a lot of drama. And I'm like, and I didn't even say it out loud. It was just like, why did my kids choose such hard lessons? And immediately my older son's voice said, because we chose you, because you had us. And then they both, took their places on either side of me and said, now we have you always.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
And it's, and I still tear up because
You're
he
making me
doesn't.
tear up too.
I know he doesn't talk to me as much as my younger boy does. Um, Not verbally, that I hear, but they're always there and they're always sending me signs and showing me that they're always there. But he's busy doing his whatever he does. But it was immediate. I mean, I hadn't even finished that thought, and it was immediate. He said, "Because we chose you." And it just blew my mind. You chose me to go through all that bullshit because you had lessons to learn and you had lessons to teach me, and I had lessons to teach you, and I had lessons to learn. And when you stop and think about that, all that guilt and all that shame, it just kind of dissipates because it was all supposed to be.
And that is so beautiful. And Earth, as I always think of it, as this big ninja course that we
Yes,
chose.
exactly.
We chose to be here. We chose to be human at this time and this place. And there are things. And I think that's the biggest lesson for people is that I went to work, I showed up, I did what I was doing. I'm really good at teaching. I was able to still do that. But no one really knows what's going on with someone else at home unless they tell them.
Yeah,
And everyone has something. That's why we're here.
yeah,
And so it's just a reminder to be gentle to the people around you. You don't really know what they're experiencing or going
right,
through. And maybe that one conversation you have with them can change everything for them.
right.
And it
Yes,
really can. Like I remember when we had to call the crisis team because it was really bad at one point. And I remember my husband talking to the crisis team, and men deal with things very differently as well. And it
yeah,
was also, this has been a huge lesson for him in just how to deal and how to walk through it. He didn't have my education background. And
right.
he had to learn that, you know what? Deal with anxiety a little differently. Can't
And
yell,
deal with
can't scream.
emotions differently too.
Right. And everything else, it was a whole new way of parenting and a new way of kind of learning how to deal. And I remember the one crisis person just saying, you know what? It's okay. I know the school wants to do something, but you're doing everything you can do. And that was a big deal because, yeah, again, we had sent her to school the one day and they picked up the phone and called us, said, come get her. I'm like, what do you mean? We took 2.5 hours to get her there. I'm not coming to get her. Like, well, she doesn't want to be here. I said, well, it's a school. Which one of them does?
Right.
And it was just when you think about some of that messaging. So it's just, yeah, being aware of all
Yes.
of the things that these kids are going through. And they're showing up at school. Some of them don't have food. Some of
Right.
them have a lot of anxiety or they have a lot going on at home. And they're showing up and still trying to do the best they can do with all of that in their backpack.
Yes. And all the different types and levels of grief. And
Yeah.
that's something that I've learned so much about in the last year and a half is it's not just death that we grieve. Grieving is part of life. Any perceived loss causes grief. So these
Absolutely.
kids that are preteen and teens are really feeling grief on a regular basis because their friendships come and go. Today you're my best friend, tomorrow you hate me. That's grief.
Yeah.
And nobody talks about how to deal with it. So it
And then
just
you
gets
add in
bigger.
the pandemic where they didn't even have the chance to have those kinds of connections.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So
you
it's
have a whole other level. But it's why I really love doing what I do because
right,
I get to combine hypnosis, energy healing, NLP, cognitive behavioral therapy, and we're working on pieces in the brain because anyone can have something that happens to them and it can be very traumatic to them. To someone else, it might not seem like a big deal. It's like, oh, well, you should just get over that. But to
right.
them, especially if you hear this between the ages of 0 and 7, when you're like walking around like this giant unconscious sponge,
Yeah,
you're picking things up and they're lodging in there. And in order to move forward, sometimes we have to pick them back out. But the piece that we don't always deal with is the body piece.
Yeah.
And I know for me, that was the big deal, was the body piece. Like my parents may have dealt with the alcohol piece, but what I was doing is I was soothing with food, and I was constantly hating myself because I took all of that trauma and I turned it all inward. And when you do that, I may have been silent outside, but my head was blowing up. And those thoughts were really, really toxic and very hurtful. And they were happening in my head constantly. Because you think about the average person has 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And most of them are the same ones we repeat over and over. So changing that made such a big difference to me. And I think that's where I saw a lot of the growth. But it really wasn't until I started dealing with that capital T trauma. And there's more pieces I won't get into, but that's when I noticed the healing beginning. Because it's layers. It's like a giant onion. And you're just peeling off one layer at a time. And you're working on that self-acceptance. And that was a big one for me. And that was the big piece of not being able to show up and accept myself for who I am.
Right.
And that's huge. And I think a lot of teenagers, young elementary school kids are looking in the mirror and they're saying, you know what? We don't look like these people on social media who have curated images. We don't look like the people in magazines with $1 million of airbrushing. And they get these messages in their head and they think, you know what? I'm not good enough. I don't measure up. I'm not like that. I'm not like the pretty people that are in the movies or wherever else. And then they really take that into themselves. So I think a big part of our job right now is to say, you know what? It's okay. It's okay to be different.
Yeah.
And it's not different because everyone is experiencing the same thing.
Right. Absolutely. And to model that for our children. And before I lost my boys, that was the big thing that I was on my soapbox about, is the self-love factor. And trauma is the gateway drug.
Yeah.
And if we can get to the children and teach them the skills to deal with their trauma in the moment, but we also have to get the parents to model that behavior, because that's how they learn, is by watching and seeing it done. So when the parents are doing that work, the kids naturally learn it. And then they're not going to grow up with all those layers of trauma that have been internalized.
Absolutely. And then they're better people in the world.
Yeah.
They have compassion and empathy. They're
Right.
able to respect each other, because that's really what we want, right? I
Yeah.
always tell my children, show up and be kind. Like, being kind matters far more to me than any kind of academics. I mean, they both happen to be very smart, but be kind,
Yes.
because people are going to remember how you treat them.
Yes. People remember what you made them feel.
Exactly.
So tell me more about hypnotherapy. Now, I know, obviously, because we've done a session and you're
Yes.
amazing. and I've been, even before we did a session, I did the whole Marissa Peers, thing on Mind Valley, and was way into it anyway, but I never had done a one-on-one session until you. And it's so powerful and so beautiful.
Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So what we do is we go in, first of all, and I do an intake and I find out what you want to work on. And more importantly, what you want to have happen in the world. Because one of my gifts, as I mentioned, I'm fairly good at writing, and I'm good at picking out those pieces to make that dream life, to make all of the things combined that you want to have happen in your life and put them down into words, because words are spells. I'm a teacher and we talk about spelling, you're putting it out there into the world. So I always say be careful how you speak, but it's even more important in hypnosis, because what happens is your subconscious mind is hearing all of these things and is taking them on. So I'm very careful to make sure that I'm not putting anything negative in there at all. I make sure that when I write things, it's always in positive. And it really doesn't matter because your brain doesn't absorb the negative anyways.
Right.
So what we do is we go through and we go back to some scenes from your childhood. So depending on what you're working on. So for example, if we were working on visibility, because showing up in the world is a challenge. And I've done some work with other people in visibility as well, because not only do I do the work, but I have it too, because we all do. We all have to move forward. So if we're working on visibility, we go back to a scene in your childhood where that was an issue. And it doesn't even have to be in childhood. Scenes can come up from all over. Sometimes they come from past lives. Sometimes they come from the womb. Sometimes they can be really dark scenes. And that's usually when we have some big trauma happening. And what I do is I use energy while I'm doing it at the same time. So while I'm bringing up the scene, I'm also clearing it energetically and I'm moving some things around. We might bring your adult self into a scene that was really, really traumatic for you, and we might redo the scene because some of the science shows that even our memories are very flawed. We can go back and we can change things that have already happened and we can change our memories.
Right.
And you think about how cool that is. But also, like, think about a police report. If you ask 5 different people, they are going to remember different things.
Well,
They're
if
not.
you ask my kids about something that happened when they're all there, and you're going to get 10 different stories. It's all
Absolutely.
in the perception.
And the reason that happens is because we have so many bits of information coming at us at once, and we can only perceive a small portion of that. And it's your reticular activating system that actually filters. So it's kind of like putting on glasses. So you have to think, what kind of glasses do I want to put on? Do I want to put on those rose colored glasses and see things in a positive light? Or do I want to put on, some other kind of glasses? Because you get to choose. You get to choose what you bring in, choose what you filter. And so that's what we're doing when we're clearing things out of your mind. We're taking those pieces out. But what I have noticed is how important the body is to that process. And I've also been doing a program on somatics. So I've been incorporating more of that in my practice. You have to come and do a new session because I've
Yes.
got new tricks.
Yes, because you weren't doing all the energy work then.
There we go. And bringing it into your body because sometimes all of that wisdom is trapped in your body and the trauma. I know that was a big one for me. The trauma was trapped there and I've had to remove it. And you can't access it through the brain. You
Right.
have to start in the body and you have to go with that wisdom. And so that's the piece that I've been working on, bringing that in and releasing it. And then at the end of all of that, we bring in a transformation. To me, that's the fun part. This is the piece that lights me up. I absolutely love doing it. I channel different pieces in. And I may have like the outline of a script as I go in, but I'm channeling information and we're putting in your own thoughts, your own words, what you want to have happen in your life. And that's the recording that you're going to listen to for 21 days. And the reason we do 21 days, because it takes between 21 and 66 to create a new habit. So in listening to that over and over again, you're kind of marinating your brain in all of these great thoughts. Right? So you're listening and you're listening either before you go to bed or first thing in the morning, because that's when your brain is open to listening to those things and you're picking it up more. That moment when you're kind of half asleep and you're sort of groggy and just waking up, that's a great time to do affirmations or to do something that you want to soak into your mind because you're in a different state of being. So that's what we're doing is we're listening and we're breaking things. But it's also keeping in mind it's a journey, like anything else. I know Marissa Peer really likes to talk about her rapid one and done, and sometimes it can be one and done.
Yes.
But sometimes there are lots of layers, and we're uncovering one layer at a time, and it's going through it. It's doing the work. It's working through it.
Well,
It's
then you're creating new neural pathways.
absolutely. If you've had that same kind of trauma and that kind of path for your entire life, you're disrupting that.
Yeah.
So now you have to change it. And we can do that, absolutely. But we have to make sure we disrupt it.
Yeah.
And that requires different tools. And that's where I really like the energy, because I'm just the vessel. I'm pretty much stepping out of the way. And at the beginning, that was hard for me because I took it on and I thought, you know what? Well, if this person didn't heal and this person healed, what's the difference? Like, what am I doing wrong? But it's not me.
Mhm.
It's what are people ready to move into as their
Yes.
next step?
Yeah.
And it's the divine and source coming in, or whatever language you have. I like Gus, God, universe, and source. So I like to say Gus. Gus comes in and helps us out because we're not doing it alone.
Right.
We're never doing the healing alone. We're just there as that kind of open channel, allowing it to come through. And that's where the magic happens. And that's where things can change instantaneously.
Right.
And that's why I really, really love this. And it's such a beautiful way to have change happen and to move forward in your journey.
Yeah. And it is super powerful. Even before you started with the energy and the somatics. But yeah, it's exciting. And so you started a new group. I'm excited.
Yes, I've started a new group, Infinite Reality Shifts. We are building a community. I would love to have anyone out there come and join us. We're doing actually a huge contest this week, kind of in honor of my birthday, which is the 25th. Feel free to wish me happy birthday. And we're giving away a lot of incredible prizes. We have 8 amazing women that have shown up and they are gifting prizes to the community. And I'm enjoying this so much that I would like to continue it on. So, what I would like to do is have different people come and join our community because I believe there's no real competition. We're all one and we all have our own unique gifts, but we're all connected. So, when people can show up and they can shine and they can be in their light, then that allows everyone to benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So I'm really hoping, Angelique, you will come and join us in one of these spotlights because that
I
would be
will. I will, definitely. I was kind of out of touch, I was gone 3 weeks and spending time with kids and grandbabies, and I hadn't been home since my son's funeral, so it had been 9 months, 10 months, and grandbabies grow so fast, when they're toddlers and babies. And I got to meet the youngest one. She's only 5 months old, so I got to meet the newest one.
I love that new baby smell. It's better than new car smell.
And she's so happy. The two youngest are two girls, and they are the happiest babies. They just giggle and laugh, and they don't mind being passed around to everybody. And so we just had so much fun.
That's
So,
amazing. And imagine all of these things that you have learned and
yes,
that you can share with your powerful medicine
yeah,
and how that will change these kids' lives.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, I did come here to be a disruptor.
That is true. Your human design's definitely a disruptor.
And end the cycles here, because that's when I started my journey, is when I saw those generational traumas being passed down, to my kids and then to my grandkids. And I'm like, no, this, I have to figure out how to stop this, because yes, I raised them in that trauma, but now it's being passed down, and the cycles are just continuing, so it's got to stop.
It does.
And
But it's interesting how we are different parents to each one of our kids. I would say
yes,
my kids are completely different because they had different versions of me,
right,
but they were also different themselves, different temperaments, different things. So what happens is our kids have completely separate experiences.
yes, absolutely, they do. And understanding that we have that availability of the energy work and the clearing and that we can go in and we can change those generational curses and, the cycles that came in even with us and were passed down. We can go in and disrupt those, and
Absolutely.
that's been my biggest lesson. And you've walked this path with me, is stepping back and not being that rescue net and not being the mom savior, because my kids are adults and that was leaking my energy. And so I've had to learn to step back and say, I love you and I will support you from here, but I will not be part of your chaos and your drama and whatever lessons you're going through right now. I won't engage in that, but I can do the work at a soul level and a higher self level to keep those paths open and, keep those
Absolutely.
relationships, well, heal those relationships, because right now I have a kid that disowned me. So,
But I think that's the biggest challenge, especially when you grow up in trauma and
yeah,
you learn codependence. I learned to rely on myself because that was the only
right,
person I could rely on, right?
yeah.
And if I didn't do it, then it wasn't going to happen.
Well, and
So,
hyper independence is a trauma response.
absolutely. And the other trauma response is watching everyone and
Yeah,
learning and listening because you want to make sure that they're not going to do something to hurt you. So you
right.
become super vigilant. And for me, I didn't realize, because I have a lot of intuitive gifts, I just thought I was just noticing patterns. And I was noticing what they were going to do because I was paying attention, because I was looking for that scary monster and I was looking everywhere around the room to find that person. So it's absolutely a trauma response,
Oh, yeah.
but it developed empathy,
Yes.
lots and lots of empathy. But I have to make sure I watch boundaries. And
Yeah.
sometimes I have to form a bigger, stronger boundary because I wasn't used to having boundaries. I was
Right.
used to being that good little girl, the people pleaser, because if I was good, then I wasn't going to get in trouble.
Right. Absolutely. And those boundaries, I think I Jesse and I talked a little bit about it on Saturday in her episode too. Learning to be able to set those boundaries and stay in our power
Yes,
is so freeing, because we can't change their outcomes. We can't fix them. They're not broken any more than we're broken.
right.
We have to allow them to learn their lessons. And
Absolutely.
when we can step back and say, yes, I love you, and yes, I'll support you, but I won't engage, that frees us so much to come back to us and do the work on us. And then we can do that work at soul level also with them and with those relationships.
Absolutely. But that's where it's important to have a community because it's not easy to do,
Yeah,
especially when you're dealing with people that you've had a trauma response with. It's pretty
right.
deep.
Yeah,
So you may need that community support, that person beside you that says, you know what, it's okay.
right.
I'm here
Absolutely.
to hold space for you. I'm here to support you. And it's okay. It's okay to say no and mean it as a complete sentence.
Right.
It's
It's
okay.
okay to say nothing.
It's
It's
okay to
okay
say
to
nothing.
have
And you
no
can
response.
explain. You're right. For me, that was hard because I always wanted to explain like every little thing. Well, like not doing this because this, and this.
Yeah.
The goat ran away, and this happened, and that happened.
Well, and when they're, poking at you and picking at you because they're used to you being that way,
Yes,
and, coming and being that safety net and saying, oh, it's okay, I'll fix it. But when you're not doing it and they keep poking, and the closest people know how to,
oh, they get angry.
they poke really, they hit the buttons that hurt the most.
Yep.
No response is the best option, because you're not bringing that energy into yourself, and you're not allowing that to come back at you. Now, it does piss them off even more because they can't push your buttons. When you set those good boundaries, they can't get to those buttons anymore, and that does make them angry.
It does, especially since they installed the buttons, so they know exactly
Right.
where they are.
Exactly. But it's a whole new lightness and freedom in my energy that I have never experienced before. And thank God for Holly because she has taught us so much in the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
Uh, and when I started, when I understood it and started practicing that and got past the guilt and the shame of I was a terrible mother, and I raised my kids and created all this trauma and shit like that, um, then I could come back and say, no, it wasn't my fault. I did the best I could with the skills and knowledge I had,
Yeah.
and I raised them and kept them alive until they were 18. And from that point, it's not my job anymore.
And I think in parenthood, there's so much judgment. I mean,
Yes.
it's right from day one. It's okay, you're not breastfeeding. Oh my God, how could you? You are breastfeeding. Oh my God, how could you?
Yeah,
Right.
there's so much opposing crap. And if you don't have that solid foundation of who you are and what you believe, but also the fact that our beliefs and our truths can change over time,
Right.
and and that's okay.
And I think having that conversation and
Yeah.
just talking about things and
Yes.
normalizing them and being able to say, you know what? This is scary. It's not
Right.
an easy job. I'm not sure what I'm doing. Some of the time, I'm making shit up as fast as I can and throwing it over my shoulder as quickly as I can. And I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. But
Right.
having other people to be able to have that conversation with and for them to hold you and say, you know what?
Oh
I
yeah.
kind of feel that way too.
And
And
that's
then you won't feel so alone.
yeah. And that's why we need the village. It's not
Absolutely.
it's not that we're not capable, but we need that support. And I wouldn't have made it through losing my boys if I didn't have the village I created and the circles I put myself in. There's no way I wouldn't have made it through. I probably would have taken myself out.
Absolutely. And I think it's been so important. I know for me to invest in different things and different people that can help me on my journey because I can't do it all as one person.
Right.
No one can. And that's why the healing components are so important
Absolutely.
because we need to stand with other people and work together. And
Well,
sometimes you can't see your own blocks.
yeah, we can't see our own blocks, and we made those contracts with those people before we were all people. Jesse was talking Saturday. One of the doctors that she read one of the books on her path, and she was talking about the soul contracts and the lessons that we chose. And she said in there she gives the example of these souls are sitting at this bus stop and
Yes.
talking about, oh, what did you choose? What are you going to learn this time around? And they start making those contracts with each other while they're waiting to come her side. And she said, and some of them aren't pretty. Like this, I needed to learn this lesson in forgiveness. And I needed to learn this lesson. What did she say? Something else, but I can't remember what that one was. But it was like, okay, so well, we sealed this soul contract. So this guy was a drunk driver and hit this person and like injured them or killed their family member or something. So they had to learn that forgiveness. And this person had to learn their lesson and be, even though it wasn't a pretty thing, that's what they agreed to because that fulfilled those contracts and those lessons that they came here for.
Absolutely. And all we can do is go through and surrender
Yeah,
a little bit,
yeah,
and just think about, you know what? What's the positive in all this?
right. And
What are
that's
the
why I talk about finding the joy through the grief, because it's still there, because we have that duality. We can hold opposing emotions, you know. I can still be sad and still miss my boys, but there's still joy and there's still beauty and life. And it's not all terrible.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I mean, I know we could talk all day, and we haven't connected one on one in a while, so it's been
That's true. We'll have to do that.
yes,
Well, thank
and
you so much for allowing me to share a portion of my journey with you today, and
yes,
to have all of these open conversations, because I think that helps move the collective forward. Because we are a collective, we are all working together.
absolutely, and it helps to normalize,
Yeah,
and it helps people understand that all that judgment is just
it's just
thoughts that
noise.
aren't. Yeah, it's noise, and it's just the way. It's that conditioning that we were raised in. We have conditioning and programming, and having that empathy, like you said, and that compassion and kindness. If you wouldn't speak those things or have that judgment about your loved one or your child,
Right.
then why would you have it about somebody else? Because you don't, like you said, we don't know what anybody's going through.
We really don't.
Yeah. One last thought to leave everybody with.
Okay.
Yep, for you.
Oh, for me.
Yes.
Sorry, I thought you were sharing one
No,
last thought. I was waiting.
no, you. Uh,
Just to remember that it's all a journey. You're not broken, you're becoming.
yes.
And as we move through from place to place, just know that we're growing together, and reach out and connect when you need that connection with someone, because that's the way to move forward.
Absolutely. And that's why we have the experiences we have, because that allows us to connect
Yeah.
with others and feel safe.
And find those people to be around that are
Right.
positive, because
Yeah.
you have those mirror neurons, and you want to be around people that uplift you and elevate you and make you feel good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because the energy in your environment's vital. Well, thank you again.
Thank
And
you.
I think your link is in the description. If it's not, I will go add it later. And then I will upload this to TikTok and Instagram.
Amazing. And I would love to have people come out and join us. Our contest ends on Saturday, May 24th,
Yep.
and we're
Well,
giving away a lot of prizes. So
yes,
come.
I won yesterday.
Wonderful. Yeah, showing up in the lives. You never know. People are gifting things right, left, and
Yeah,
center. Amazing.
I didn't even know that you guys were doing the gifts during the lives. I just wanted to come see Whitney.
I know. Whitney is amazing.
Oh my gosh, she
Celebrating
is.
Whitney.
I want her on here at some point.
I'm sure she would be more than happy to. There's lots of
I
people
believe.
that
Oh
we can
yeah,
send your way.
absolutely. Yes, definitely. Send them my way and drop the link for your group in the
Okay.
comments so that people can join. And we will catch you later.